So I just recently bought volume one of Jonathan Hickman's X-Men. I don't know, there's about six issues in here. It's off his new run. The X-Men was basically rebooted in Marvel Comics. They were kind of put on the back burner for a couple years due to the whole licensing of movies, whatever. I don't care what anyone says. Oh, it wasn't due to that. Yeah, let's be real. It was because of that. It was because they didn't own the rights to the movies. So the X-Men they didn't want to market for them. Disney didn't want to market for them, put money in Fox's pockets. So now that merger came through, then you got a whole nice rebranding of the X-Men
Right.
trilogy and franchise across Marvel Comics.
Welcome home.
Welcome home, right? So they put a top tier writer on it, Jonathan Hickman. He's done a couple of great works, including one of my favorite Marvel events in the last 10 years was Secret Wars back in like 2015, which was a phenomenal book. And then he did a New Avengers, which was a prelude to that, which was basically the sequel to the Illuminati series for a few years prior. But Jonathan Hickman is a top tier writer. Put him on the book. He rebranded the whole X-Men series. He's got multiple miniseries going through. They all kind of interconnect and connect with each other into one complete story. Unfortunately, I don't have all those graphic novels. I just got the main title, the X-Men title here. But basically, the X-Men have reconciled with all the villains. Every single mutant has basically is living in peace and harmony with X-Men. They now live on the island of Krakoa, and it's the living island, and it's like it's evolved and it's transformed to some super mutant utopia on this
Hmm.
island. And so with that, now the X-Men have bonded with villains, and it's a new mutant sanctuary. But this time it's backed by every single mutant out there. It's no longer fighting between mutants. It's now a whole collaborative effort. You got Apocalypse. Apocalypse is with them. You got Magneto, who's been with the X-Men for a while now. You got Mr. Sinister. You got everybody. Everybody's in that piece. You got the Hellfire Club. Everyone literally's come together and said, you know what? We're going to do this for the best of mutant kind. No more fighting each other. No more this and that, XYZ. We got one vision, one goal. Let's get it done. So with that premise, there's been a few criticism. It's praised, but it's also hated at the same time.
Okay,
Because
so what are the criticisms?
the criticisms of it is basically that the X-Men have become racist. So with that, a lot of the fans are claiming that, oh, the X-Men, they used to help everybody. And now with this new run, they have kind of a new thing where they only help out mutants. They don't
Okay.
really help out humans anymore. They basically are like, the Avengers got y'all. Y'all got a whole lot of resources for human problems. We're not dealing with it. I mean, we'll help you. We'll save you if we need to save you, right? If like, there's a human in front of us or whatever, like we still got your back, but we ain't actively going out there to try to save you guys.
And this is an issue. This is a criticism. What you were saying then, right?
Yeah, this is a criticism within a community that thinks that X-Men have now turned a blind eye to their origins and they don't help everyone out, and so now the X-Men are racist towards humans, and now they're basically bigots.
That's
So
insane.
yeah, the X-Men are bigots now because they don't actively go out and try to help humans like mutants anymore. So with that also, they also have some new medicine. They got this crazy good ass medicine and this pharmaceutical remedies that they have that can cure cancer, save the world, all this jazz. They got all this stuff going on, and they're basically not sharing their resources with the world, kind of like Wakanda. They're basically saying we're not going to share our resources with the humans unless it's for money. And then with this issue, Magneto kind of broke it down, saying he's basically the mutants are now united, and we're going to take over in the way humans have taken over. We're not going to do this. We're not going to go in this physical fight, this war zone. We're going to do some economic sovereignty and take over your countries. We're going to buy your politicians. We're going to buy your presidents. We're going to buy your companies. You know what I'm saying? We're just basically going to have our foot in every single aspect of your lives behind the scenes.
Okay.
And even though you may not like it, of course, there's gonna be people who aren't gonna like it. They're not really gonna be any kind of power to do so anything about it.
Right.
So
There's nothing you can do about it. You just got to deal with it.
right. We're gonna put your people in debt, You're gonna have your. He said the same way you guys came to power, we're gonna come to power. So no more fighting wars physically. We're gonna avoid all that. We're just basically gonna buy you guys out from our new resources and our new strength and unity.
Hmm.
And then basically, Apocalypse was, you saw the page, Apocalypse was flexing on them, saying, I know humans and you guys destroy, you forget your own history, will conveniently, so that you guys rinse, repeat, and do the same things to establish power and control. So, yeah, this is all was taking place at some big economic gathering in Europe, whatever. So, with all that being said, what do you have in mind in terms of like Eric's comments about the criticism towards the series, and how do you overall feel about this new direction?
Okay, for starters, I'm gonna say that it's refreshing to see a different take on
Mm-hmm.
X-Men. I mean, having been grown up in the '90s, being a fan,
Uh,
carrying that over into the movies, and overall just being a minority in particular, and kind of knowing the backstory behind X-Men, and not necessarily identifying with it, but seeing similarities between history in the way that people who look like us have been treated, specifically in America. It's refreshing to see that it's going in a direction of taking mutants and seeing what that particular world would look like with them unified, because
mm,
that's not something that you're used to seeing as it relates to that property. I think we've kind of been used to seeing Charles side fighting for mutant kind advancing alongside humans, and then you have Magneto being the more radical side, obviously, right?
right.
So the idea that people would criticize a property like X-Men for being bigoted or prejudiced, that doesn't make sense. Like that sounds insane to me. Like, what are we talking about here? We're talking about fictional characters set within a fictional universe. That sounds like kicking up dust for the sake of kicking up dust, in my opinion, because there's no
Uh-huh.
real conversation to be had there. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, every story progresses. I don't
Right.
know that people had the same complaints when, off topic, when they see a version of Batman that's basically the Punisher. There's no collective clutching of pearls saying
Right.
that's not my Batman. But now
Well,
in this instance, you got people saying those aren't my X-Men.
pretty much, yeah. Or to another light, when Captain America basically doesn't work for Shield or is anti-government, they applaud Captain America for basically saying, "I'm not going to be a goody two shoes scout and soldier, and I'm going to do my own thing."
Mm-hmm.
Right? In the same
Right.
same in the same light, X Men's kind of doing the same kind of route.
I just think that the a part of it could be that maybe it cuts a little bit too deep. Maybe it's a little bit too realistic in terms of what people are afraid of, or maybe have fears of something that they don't want to see. At the same time, that it sounds like kicking up dust for the sake of kicking up dust. Like, personally, that's what it sounds like to me. Now, in particular, the character of Magneto, there's always been parallels between that character Magneto and historical figures, be it a Malcolm X or
Right.
any other type of character that takes a stance of equality through, how do I put this? Equality through friction is the way that I'm going to put it. Enforcing a particular set of beliefs and standing on it in a way that may cause people to be uncomfortable or make people think about things in terms of what they don't want to think about, right? I don't disagree with that because all of that is on page. At the same time, like, and I mean, without going too far in depth, it would just be nice if someone who looked like us was the one
Mm-hmm.
on page saying that, because I think that the message would go past just what's on page. For somebody like me or you reading that, the light bulb goes off because it's something that we can identify with. It's something that you could draw an actual parallel with for a person of color, or maybe even someone, LGBTQ, someone like that. It draws a parallel because you have that level of awareness. But for some people, they need to see that in order to identify with it. You know what I mean? I don't disagree with it, but truth be told, kind of leading into what you were saying, I think X-Men, with where they are in terms of pecking order in Marvel Comics, can get away with taking a new approach. I think the collective clutching of pearls would even be a louder uproar if it wasn't the X-Men who were taking this stance. If it was one of the more mainline characters that carry over from page to on screen, I think it'd be even bigger fuss being kicked up, personally.
A couple years ago, they had the Mighty Avengers, which is basically a predominantly black team of the Avengers with Luke Cage, Monica Rambeau. You had Falcon. Yeah, it was a predominantly black cast with a few with Spider-Man, She-Hulk, whatever in there. And so what that team was basically saying was, we want to give back to the community, whatever. But they never said we're only going to help out, quote unquote, black people.
Right.
They only said that we're going to help out people who were really in trouble or in need. Now, there was no fuss about a predominantly black Avengers team because it was a great series, but it didn't really dwell. You weren't reading that for any kind of political, social, economic issues with that kind of a title series. Now, had there been rumblings about, we're only going to help out people in the hood, we're only going to help out people who look like us, then I think you would have definitely heard that outrage. Probably even more so because you have people like Spider-Man and Luke Cage, a little bit more at the time popular characters saying these kind of things. But I think honestly, I heard about this. I heard about the new X-Men run criticism, and to be honest with you, I didn't until I recently read some of these pages and read some of these concepts after the 50 plus years of X-Men history. Like you mentioned, I think it's a natural evolution of a storyline and of a franchise. Yeah, I mean, how many times can you do Magneto versus Charles Xavier? How many times can you do Mutant versus Mankind? Well, every single thing that they've done has some root in reality, and at some point, you gotta have to have a natural evolution of things.
Because you got to think in terms of what these characters are doing and what's
Hmm.
driving them. The 2020, what would the 2020 version of that same X-Men squad look like from when they started? What would the 1980s version or 1960s version, or as far back as those characters go, what would it look like if you place them within the current climate of the way that the world is now?
They'd be delusional.
It would not make sense at all. Truth be told, that would be more offensive than whatever it is that people pretended to be offended by now, in my opinion. That would be more offensive than that.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
they did have a storyline a couple years back when Beast brought back the 1960s original team, the younger version of themselves, to meet the older versions to try to calm down present day Cyclops, who was on some Brian Michael Bendis was on some Malcolm X shit. And I love this. I love that run. And again, what you said, it'd be great for a person of color with our kind of background to be writing these X-Men books.
And I'll do you one further. Like it would be great if it was a person of color that you actually see in the panels expressing these kind of feelings. Like that,
Right?
you know
Yeah.
what I mean? That's even more towards what I was leaning into. I mean, it's refreshing. I get it. Like to
Yeah.
see a character like Cyclops take a radical turn, aside from being the Boy Scout leader in terms of wrestling, we'll call him the white meat baby face that can do no wrong, right?
Right.
It's interesting to see a character like that take that kind of turn. But again, when you know that it's meant to reflect something that's going on in the real world or a real world issue, it would be
Mm-hmm.
great to see someone of a different background actually expressing these feelings on a panel, because then I think it gives the opportunity for it to transcend just that particular medium. You know what I mean?
Right. Like safely riding within the margins with
Yep.
having a white character,
Mm-hmm.
Caucasian character. taking these stances. It doesn't ruffle the feathers as much as it would be if you were given to a black character talking these things.
Right, because then it goes past context. You know what I mean? I think it allows a situation for certain conversations, or it lends a chance for people to actually be uncomfortable with looking at what they're looking at. Sometimes that's not really the worst thing in the world. Like, it's not just because something might make a person uncomfortable doesn't mean that it's not a conversation that still needs to be had.
To look back, the storylines have evolved. I mean, if you were to read some of the material of Stan Lee's early run compared to their storylines of the past, let's just say 15, 20 years, no fault of Stan Lee for what he was writing at the time. But in terms of complexity, in terms of consequences, in terms of basically dire need, a sense of urgency, the material has, elevated to a point where it is a little bit more reflective of current day topics, of current day activity. It has evolved to a point where it should be uncomfortable because our times are becoming more uncomfortable. You can safely turn a blind eye to certain things. The X-Men may not be for you. I think there's a basic fantasy involved with the X-Men of being an outsider, outcast, underdog that
Right.
everyone hates. That's
Right.
a basic consumption of the X-Men, and that's relatable to everyone to a certain degree.
Right. Because in the stories that we read in TV shows and movies, no one actually chooses to be a mutant.